Welcome to another World Cup Mood Board with me, Jarrod Kimber, here for 99.94. All right, well, that was a game that seemed over very early on. The South African Quicks were absolutely all over India to start that game. And in fact, let us just have a look at, this is one of the later field maps. Oh, I don't have it. Top left-hand corner, you can see it here. Anyway, the field map. You could see that everyone was behind point back on the boundary. So you've got two very, very fine fielders at fine leg and at third. Then you've got the other two. Quite often you had a slip in this game as well. It was very spicy. We saw that even with Pakistan bowling to Netherlands and a little bit of Netherlands bowling to Pakistan as well. And it looked like South Africa were going to knock India out of the game at that point. That never quite happened because of Sky's innings. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But because of that, they got to 133 India, and they were in the match. I'm not sure they quite had the bowlers to fully exploit these conditions, but any good seam bowlers on this surface, as the Dutch bowlers had shown earlier, were quite handy in this particular game, or on this particular pitch, I should say. And so with that, if they'd got to 150, India would have almost been favourites. Not if you hadn't seen much of this tournament, of course, or you think about it more traditionally in T20, but from everything we've seen so far, I think it would have been really fascinating cricket if India had got even an extra 10 runs or so more. I mean, we watched Zimbabwe not allow Pakistan to chase less than this total. And also, they didn't always chase that particular total that well either. But sorry, in the Netherlands game, I should say. So, yeah, really a fascinating, low-scoring game again. But it really did keep South Africa interested. India interested. And, of course, then Arshdeep did this, right? So his first over wickets, you could see he swung one away beautifully to get Quinton de Kock, and then he swung one back in to take the wicket of Riley Russo. He probably deserves more chat than he's going to get on this particular show, but I certainly thought he bowled really well. Interesting, again, that this was probably set up for anchor batters, and Temba Bavuma was there. He was like looking for form. The whole thing was set up completely for Temba Bavuma to do quite well. And he somehow managed to get himself out, caught down the leg side, scooping. Fantastic catch by Dinesh Karthik as well on that particular one. But when those 3 wickets had gone, there is no doubt that India were well on top. And they were probably well on top all the way through to the toilet timeout at the 10 over mark. That's when the game changed direction. And we're just going to go through a few things that happened at that point. In the 11th over, Aiden Markram decided to attack Hardik. He got a top edge that went to the rope. And then he got 4 byes from a bouncer that DK couldn't catch. That's fine. These things happen. In the 12th over, Markram kept going against Ashwin. He hit a boundary early on, but then he was dropped by Virat Kohli from Ashwin. It was a very clever ball. He saw him coming. He dragged it wide, and Markram got himself into a huge tangle. That was a huge moment in the 12th over. And then in the 13th over, Shami came on, and South Africa decided a little bit to play him out. They knew that he was brought on to get a wicket. They had 3 dot balls to start in the first little part of the over. There was a 2 in there as well. And then Miller got a very good ball. All he could do was push it out on the offside, and utter confusion from the 2 South African players at this point, where they weren't sure if they were going for the single or not. They ended up going through for it, which would have or should have given Rohit Sharma a very, very easy run out, where he was running onto his right hand and he just had to underarm the ball from a couple of meters away, looking at all 3 stumps. And he missed again. And the very next over, the 14th over, Markram and Miller both hit 6s from Ashwin. And that was kind of it. Again, the second time that South Africa had really got massively ahead in this game. But to be fair to India, on both occasions, they fought themselves back in. But when they couldn't dismiss Miller, the only other thing they were going to be able to win this game with was keeping him off strike. They couldn't do it enough. So, hell of a win for South Africa. Big loss for India, but probably a much bigger loss for Pakistan. who now won't be going through to the next rounds unless, I don't know. I think South Africa have to lose to the Netherlands at midnight at the crossroads while drinking peyote or something in order for Pakistan to go through to the next round. I actually had a look at the odds. I think you can get Pakistan now at 60-1. I still think that's probably a little bit short looking at what they have to do to qualify. But this tournament's been so weird, who knows? But let's look at the players who really set this up for South Africa early on. Marco Jansen might currently be the most disappointed bowler in South Africa, missing out on, or maybe in the planet, missing out on playing at Perth, where Bruce Reid, the original Marco Jansen, made his name as a tall left armour. They used, obviously they wanted Parnell, maybe because he's a slightly better batter at this point, or maybe it was the swing against the Indian the Indian batters up front. Could have been both even. But for all the South African bowlers, this pitch was pretty much like Christmas. Alungi Ngidi has one of the highest percentages of slow balls in the world, and he was not bowling many of those in this game, was he? If you look at this in front of us here, this is his strike rate. So he takes a wicket every 12 balls. The next best player on this list is actually Obed McCoy, who takes it every 13 balls. I mean, Ngidi over the last 3 years has just been playing the game completely. Oh, that was quite dramatic. But you can see the drop off between number 1 and number 2 anyway. And also just where the normal bowlers are, like they come up towards that 13, 14, 15 mark. And even for death bowler, to be able to take wickets as much as Ngidi has over the last couple of years is incredible. And of course, he does that because he has very fast arm action, but puts incredible revs on the ball. So it's not that he's deceiving people with the slow balls. Everyone knows he's going to bowl them. It's just that the action he's putting on the slow ball, it makes it really hard. It dips. Sometimes they spin. They bounce at funny angles when he bowls them. He really does remarkable things with those. But he took one look at this wicket and he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And here is a video that I pre-prepared just on Ngidi bowling a little bit faster than he normally does. Wickets, and he went into the wicket quite hard. Now, he might be the third quickest in this attack, but that's only because the others have real juice. But he is tall and strong, and have a look where he hits Rohit on the bat against KL Rahul. Again, it just gets a little bit more bounce than you would expect from a normal ball in that particular position, right? Not quite trampoline, but still. Virat Kohli goes for the hook shot. Again, gets it very, very high. How high? Well, let's just have a look, shall we? Yeah, that's high. On the stickers and on the top edge of the stickers. And then our last one is Hardik Pandya. And when I first saw this, I thought, maybe that one wasn't top edge like the other ones. Oh, no. I was obviously wrong. There it is. And also quite a tasty catch down on the boundary from Kagiso Rabada. So incredible stuff from Ngidi there. And I like someone bowling, different. I think he said after the game that he's played at Perth a little bit more. So before, I should say. So he knew what he had to do. And I thought he handled that very well. Nortje didn't get the figures in this one, but he was absolutely terrifying on this wicket. The ball he bowled to Virat was, a foot outside off stump. It seemed to bounce over middle and leg stump. Absolutely a filthy delivery. Later, he'd deliver another wobble ball that moved away. So he's moving the wobble ball in both directions, took the edge and got the wicket of Huda, who just didn't look like he wanted to face him on that surface. But there are two other things I wanted to mention. He bowled a 133km/h knuckleball at one stage. And I'm not actually sure that the slips were close enough to him to technically call them slips. I have seen at the whacker before, I think for Dirk Nannes and Sean Tate, we've seen, wicketkeeper and slips even further back than that. But I don't think I've ever seen that anywhere else. Obviously it's all Western Australia, but that pitch isn't quite the same as the whacker. So if you're young and you're looking at that, there's some great highlights of some of the old spells at the whacker where fielders, wicketkeepers and slips are incredibly far back. But let's just move on to Sky now. I thought he played a fantastic innings. Let me have a look what we got here. All right, so he put pressure back on the bowlers almost from the moment they started losing wickets. That's not a particularly easy thing to do. You need to really be sure of your spot. And obviously he should be because, of the players at this World Cup, this is their scoring in the last, this year alone. And you can see that I think he scored the most runs of any international cricketer this year in T20 cricket. And he's done it faster than anyone else. And as you can see, he still has one of the best averages as well. Absolutely phenomenal. And what he did today wasn't, it wasn't slogging. He was unique. It was a very technical takedown of what he needed to do on a pitch like this. So we're just going to play the video of having a look at Sky's innings briefly. Look at the tape for this. Here he moves across the crease and uses a pace against Nortje. It's probably a little bit too full. But anyway, this one is something completely else. It's a high-class shot, and I want to talk about a few different things here. All right, the first one is that he does a trigger movement to give himself a better angle, right? So he's already moved across, but when the ball comes out, he actually then moves again, now gives himself a great angle, and then he decides to finish that by just playing this shot. Absolutely extraordinary. Remember that no one else on this pitch could actually even play a proper pull shot, and he plays whatever that is. This is just over pitched, smashed down the ground, beautiful on drive. More importantly, though, this also brings up his 50 from 30. But I just want to highlight that he went after Maharaj as well. Knew this was a good matchup in Perth, and that's a proper Perth shot to a spinner as well. This one coming up next is a little bit different because this is more the proper kind of shot that Sky would play against the spinner, taking him downtown, and there's Big Langston with his arms up. He cuts this off, leg stump, let's say? I mean, the contact is on middle, but the angle suggests it could have even hit leg. But what he does is he makes a boundary opportunity out of a ball that wasn't there, and then this. Just this sweep shot thing that is ridiculous. And, that's where Sky likes to hit the ball, and that's where he hit the ball. So yeah, fantastic bowling, fantastic batting there. He gave the Indian bowlers a game, really, and wasn't that far away from changing it completely. And, even having India as favourites, had he stuck around for a little bit longer. But just on that attack on Maharaj directly, Maharaj went for around 30 runs in his 3 overs. And you can just see how much of a bigger jump there is from the seamers, and even Markram's 1 over of spin that he managed to steal that India probably should have capitalized on. But it was that Maharaj, that the extra runs they got off that spell, which they had to go for, but he still had to execute it well without losing his wicket, which is a very tough thing to do. But that really put India in for a chance to get it. In the end, it was probably that one other player didn't give him a little cameo, or the tail didn't quite hit the ball the way that, we've seen some of the tails save some teams at times at this tournament with a couple of lusty strikes. But it's a fantastic game. And if those two teams end up in the semi-finals, which they should, I don't think this says anything too poor about either of them. I really do think that was a really good game of cricket. And let's go on to Bangladesh. The grit and grind era of Memphis Grizzlies basketball was very successful for the Memphis Grizzlies. If you haven't spent a lot of time watching basketball, especially in the 2000s, they essentially, what they did was they had been rubbish for a long time, and instead of playing a very attacking and I don't know, what would you say, pretty version of basketball, they went the other way. They essentially went high pressure on ball defense. They milked the clock for a long time to keep the game a little bit slower. They would post up their Spanish giant Marc Gasol and be very physical with the opposition. That's the pro side of it. The negative side of it would have had people saying things like the Grizzlies couldn't shoot. Their offense was very plodding. And they had no huge stars. But it wasn't sexy basketball, but it worked for Memphis. And their fans actually loved it. And their grit and grind ended up being like the term that the fans sort of embraced. I've been thinking about that a lot when looking at Bangladesh so far in this tournament. And there's absolutely no doubt that, Bangladesh has not been a very good team historically in T20 cricket. And as we've said in other shows, of the teams left at this tournament, they have the worst win-loss ratio of anyone here. But they have now won 2 games of recent times, kind of grit and grinding it and getting through. And honestly, if the Netherlands hadn't collapsed in that other game, again, it might have even been even more of a grit and grind for Bangladesh. Uh, if you look at Bangladesh, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Netherlands, I think as they are currently constructed, and also with the conditions we have seen in Australia, they're all playing a very similar style of cricket. Outside of Sikandar Raza for Zimbabwe, none of the sides really have a batter who can change the game massively quickly, I should say, on a consistent basis. But they all have, 4, 5, 6 really strong bowling options among those teams. Some good all-rounders in their top order as well. And so their bowling keeps them in the games. And it means that the games are a little bit closer and a little bit more, clenched than perhaps their fans would like. But it's because they can't dominate one side of the game. So if you look at all those teams here, I put them, they're the ones that are in the color. You probably work it out from the shirts, which team is which color. But this is the batting so far in this World Cup. And you can see that there's, of these teams, there really isn't a player who has a high average and a high strike rate. I think Namibia is, I can't remember who that was. It might have been Freilink, who's a little bit further up the front. But you can see, and you can see Raza, of course, who's had a pretty good tournament. But they're really on their own. And it's the same with the Bangladesh players. Those strike rates are more and more pedestrian or in the middle of the pack. And they don't have the kinds of players that means that they can, really take games away with the bat. When you're playing other teams like this, as Bangladesh has been, that's fine because you still have that frontline bowling. The problem for Bangladesh becomes when they go up against players, as we've seen in this tournament, like Riley Russo and Stoinis and Finn Allen. Those players, it's really hard to stop them once they get going from scoring at those very high rates. And I think that's where Bangladesh are going to have some trouble. But they ground out 2 wins, and they hope that something happens in their batting now, and or they can work out how to grind out even the better teams. Just one more thing on the Bangladesh side. So just going over to Taskin Ahmed and Mustafizur Rahman. It's actually remarkable that game went down to the final ball, but also the other thing that's worth looking at is that Bangladesh's fast bowlers have dominated again. And in both of those wins that we've talked about, they have. They conceded just 34 runs between the two of them in this game. And they picked up 5 wickets. Tuscan ended up as player of the match. And again, he was onto Zimbabwe's batters from the start. He got a wicket with his 3rd ball. I'm pretty sure, I didn't get a chance to look this up. I'm pretty sure in this tournament, he's got a wicket with the 1st ball of the game, the 2nd ball of the game, and the 3rd ball of the game now. So I don't know if that's some random hat trick that we'd never thought about before, but it's certainly something. So there's also, he got another wicket in his next over and ended up with 3 for 19 and economy rate of 4.8. He's got 8 wickets in this tournament so far. And he was very well supported by Mustafizur, who finished with 2 for 15 with an economy of 3.8 from that as well. So just in the last year, if you look at their bowlers, Mustafizur has actually struggled for wickets a little bit more than he would normally, but obviously he's been holding up his economy. But Taskin Ahmed has started to rise as someone who takes a lot of wickets for Bangladesh. A lot of those have been at this World Cup, which have been in favourable conditions and probably also help his bowling. But it does look like he's starting to get that role a little bit more today. And just on the on Mustafizur today, I talked about him having a low economy and everything, but he also got the wicket of Sikandar Raza, which I suppose at that time meant it looked like that game was going to be over. Little did we know, so let's move on to the final ball drama of this game. For those who don't know, this game between Bangladesh and Zimbabwe ended twice. It's such a beautiful cricket moment. Obviously, cricket has this long, healthy partnership with fast. Maybe the strongest partnership it's ever had, other than maybe the Commonwealth and fast. Who would have thought they'd go together? And it has a lot of complex laws written, plus the tradition and the spirit, quite often unwritten. And so a lot of weird things happen. But there was something absolutely chaotic and beautiful about what happened at the Gabba today. This wasn't a game that we thought was going to be close, right? I should say, this wasn't a game before the tournament that people was much watched. But if you listened yesterday, we talked on the show that I thought that these teams probably lined up pretty well against each other. And being that they both don't have huge batting, could have been a very close game. I didn't expect it was going to be quite this close, but it comes down to the last ball. And it gets to the point where the game is over off that last ball, and I'll explain what happened in a moment. But the game is over, and of course, the two teams get together and they start to shake hands, and the ICC officials start to rush things out onto the ground to get the interviews ready and get the ground ready for tomorrow, and all the sorts of things that they do. While all of that was happening, the umpires were still out in the middle, which is not a normal thing to have happen at that stage. And they were obviously chatting about something. And then replays of the last ball started coming up on the big screen. But at that point, still no one was actually paying attention. The last ball, so was a stumping. And Zimbabwe still had a chance of winning off that last ball. And with that stumping, that meant that the game was over. What the umpires realized, and this is really cool because this is an obscure law that not everyone knows about, but also more importantly, no one ever actually talks enough about. It happens all the time, and you see it on replays, and umpires almost never look at it. But when the stumping was taken, the gloves were slightly in front of the stumps, which, for those who don't know, is a no ball. And so that actually meant that when the umpires had finally had a look at it, it meant that Mossadegh had to go and bowl to Blessing Muzarambani again. And it was a free hit with 4 to win instead of 5. In perfect cricket style, the whole thing was a massive anticlimax for Zimbabwe. The second attempt at the last ball of the match went pretty much the same as the first one did. Blessing took a huge swing at Mossadegh and completely missed the ball. There was confusion, there was drama, and ultimately the whole thing had no bearing on anything at all. Which is pretty much when cricket's at its absolute best. It's probably one of the great World Cup cricket moments, and may get forgotten because it's not a very high-profile game. But if you want one for your quiz questions in the next few years, do you remember that game that ended twice because the wicketkeeper had his gloves ahead of the stumps and gave a no ball away? It's remarkable. It's a remarkably odd thing to have happen. Just to get back onto the actual. I was going to say onto cricket, but that was very cricket, to be fair. Just onto Sean Williams. At the start of this match, WinViz had it as 50-50% each. At the halfway stage, it was 50-50. Even when it finished the first time, I suppose it still was around a 50-50 chance. A lot of the reason, though, that Zimbabwe kept their strength in this game was because of Sean Williams. Now, Sean Williams actually started playing T20 cricket in 2006. Was the iPhone out then? I suppose it was. I don't know. It's a long time ago. Is all my point. That's my point. Was Justin Bieber was he alive then? He probably was. He probably had a couple of singles. Were One Direction together? I don't think they were. I'm looking for cultural references here and struggling. Point is, Sean Williams has been around for a very, very long time at this thing, but he hasn't actually played a lot of cricket. He only despite being around for that amount of time, he hasn't played a lot of T20. And he only just scrapes his way into the top 400 scorers in T20 cricket history, certainly in my database anyway. And you can see that, he's back in the crowd a little bit here. He's not a terrible player by any stretch of the imagination. And he adds bowling to this as well. And it's quite handy from that perspective. But he's not been a dominant T20 player. And he hasn't really been particularly good in this tournament so far either. So when Sekunda Raza went out, kind of looked like that might have been the end for Zimbabwe. And you look at Williams' early tournament, and especially as this was against some of the weaker teams, he's just not really been a brilliant T20 batter early in this tournament so far. He did find a little bit of form against Pakistan. He made the 31, was it, against them to get them somewhere. But that wasn't a particularly good score. But here, he just stuck in and played brilliantly for Zimbabwe. Regis Chakabra was with him for a little while. And then Ryan Burl was with him for a little while. But he couldn't quite get them home. He got them to needing 19 from 9. But unfortunately, was run out by Shakib with a brilliant run out there. So it's just worth mentioning because he's just a player who's been around for a long time and a very high quality player who hasn't done who had his almost had a moment at the World Cup but didn't quite get it through. But yeah, a fantastic player, Sean Williams, and another handy innings for him, giving Zimbabwe another chance in a game that probably they didn't deserve. Anyway, we're just going to take a short break here, and we'll come back with the rest of the games from there on in.
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
All right, so let's just move on to the Bangladesh batting. He says optimistically. Obviously, very seesaw nature of this game. But this is one thing where I think Zimbabwe probably did let themselves down on. Obviously, Bangladesh didn't really get away, but there was absolutely no doubt that it was a game of fine margins, and Zimbabwe weren't as good in the field as they should have been. And they dropped, Brad Evans dropped an absolute dolly off Atif that would have been bad at kind of any level. And there was another inexcusable drop, I think the over after that as well. And the only reason I'm really bringing this up is just because of how good Zimbabwe have been at all those little things so far in this tournament. They had a chance of winning 2 games in a row today, and they let Bangladesh score, well, a couple more runs than they should have, and that was the difference between them. But Zimbabwe have been a very, very good team. Let's move on to the other game. God, there's so many games today. Pakistan, several lifetimes into this tournament, and finally Pakistan has won a game. I'll not mention here that if Marcus Stoinis had been caught in the last World Cup, Pakistan might have made it to the final, and they may have won the final, because that seems a million years ago right now. I suppose Pakistan will be happy that Shadab Khan continued to play well. Mohammad Wasim took wickets. Although I still have some questions with him when it comes to his batting. Not that he had to bat today. Nazim Shah was pretty tasty as well. The interesting thing I found from this particular game, and in some ways it doesn't matter, but I do think it shows a small thing about Pakistan cricket, is they started batting very quickly. And then they ended up losing a couple of wickets, pulling it back and getting there after, 13 or 14 overs. Babar Azam was asked after the game about their batting, and he said that he was disappointed that they lost a few too many wickets. He didn't talk about the net run rate boost. Now, because of the weird way that this this schedule is going ahead, the net run rate may not matter particularly that much to the final result of this tournament. But why would you not, when you're chasing under 100 runs, at least push to the end? It doesn't matter how many wickets you lose. If they lost it, if they won this game 6 or 7 or 8 wickets down, wouldn't have really mattered. If they'd started to lose a bunch of wickets in a short period of time, they could have just chipped the ball around and won the game quite easily. I thought it was a very, very weird decision to do that. Now, it might just be because the other teams have, Bangladesh is already behind them on net run rate, and South Africa have the unequal points, and maybe they weren't thinking about India specifically because India had to win in order for Pakistan to go through. Whatever that may be, I don't know. I just felt, again, it just looked like they had a little bit of muddled thinking. None of this matters because they're probably going home now. But it was a disappointing day for Pakistan, all things considered, despite the fact that they got an easy win against the Netherlands. All right, let's just move on to the Dutch. They decided to bat first, partly because they just hadn't so far in this tournament. And if you'd been watching them chase, you could understand why they might want to see if that was holding them back. It was not. That said, facing Pakistan at Perth is not particularly a good matchup for an associate nation. Even Zimbabwe didn't make any runs when they had won that game. And we saw it with the next game as well, with the India-South Africa game. So I could go into the fact that, again, the Dutch middle order didn't make any runs, but I think some of those guys are making voodoo dolls about me at this stage. So I'm just going to praise the bowlers because I think they've been exceptional so far in this tournament. Paul van Meekeren has bowled the most balls in the World Cup so far. He has he's delivered more than anyone else, but he's also been absolutely brilliant with that. He's got a bowling average of 19.4 and he's going at under 6 runs and over. That's a pretty special double. Even this is a bowler's tournament and we all get that. But that's pretty fantastic. I've seen him bowl a lot over the years. He just feels, and I would say maybe this is maybe more over the last 18 months, having seen a little bit of Van Meekeren bowl. I just feel like he's bowling better now than he ever has before. Don't know if he's hitting a peak. Dirk Nannes talked about how he changed his run-up. Instead of counting out his steps or measuring out his steps like a lot of people do, or the length of his run-up, he's actually just measuring the bit just where his foot is got to take off. I can't think of too many bowlers who do that. That might be becoming a new trend that we'll have to look at, but he just looks like a much better bowler for me. If you look at his overall figures, in this tournament so far. Oh, we've lost that graph. If Muku's there, he can find 10.2 for me. And we can have a look at that. But essentially, you can see that all the Dutch bowlers have held up very, very well so far in this tournament. Obviously, Van Meekeren's been really good, but you've also got Logan van Beek is going at under 8 runs and over as well. The Pringle has been brilliant. I'm really worried about Pringle coming in, but he's been fantastic so far. You've got... I'm missing someone, aren't I? The two part-time spinners, Roloff Enemover and Colin Ackerman have both done well in their roles. Roloff came back today, which was lovely after the game where he was injured. And the only bowler who's really struggled when it comes to economy has been Bas de Leede. And to be fair, Bas de Leede's also taken a lot of wickets. But perhaps the news on him today was not so much about his bowling, and it was about his batting, because this happened. Muku, play the tape. All right, so that is Bas de Leede getting hit in the head. As we've seen with the rest of that game, there was a lot of bowlers bowling very fast, but Bas de Leede was the first one to really take it. He's been thrown up the order this tournament, and it makes sense for the Dutch to do that. I think they knew that he wasn't quite ready yet. But even with moments like today, I think this is quite important for him. Unfortunately for him, the ball just went, just got him just below the eye, I think, in the end. And it was a really, really good hit. I mean, he's batting first drop at Perth against Harris Rao. This is great for him to be able to learn a lot about cricket. And he's a really important player to this Dutch side going ahead, as I think we all know at this point. He ended up getting taken out of the game for a concussion protocol. He looked, there was a couple of shots of him smiling on the bench afterwards. Hopefully he's all fine. But that was a bit of a vicious one to him. But yeah, not a particularly good day for the Dutch. All things considered, they've certainly had better days so far in this tournament. But that's the end of the World Cup mood board. So we're going to take a short break here. Oh, there's that graph. Oh, he's ended up putting Paul Muku. He ended up putting Paul Van Meekeren's photo everywhere. We could probably take that down, Muku. That's the wrong graph. It's the right graph, but long story. The Dutch have bowled well. Is the takeaway from this. And I thought they even bowled well today when they had nothing on the board. That's the end of the World Cup mood board. A scripted thing. We'll be back to take your questions in a moment. And I think we've just got an ad that we'll play. And I'll go read some questions and see what we have that we can talk about.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app. And you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
Beautiful. All right, let's get to some questions. Let's see what else you can do. I found a really good question and somehow I accidentally just lost it for a second. So I'll try and come back to that one later. I know I can't find any of the questions I start. All right, I'll go back to the start. Sorry about that, everyone. This is a really interesting one. Where would you rank India as a fielding side? I think Dale Steyn, once they said Kohli was one of the better fielders in the world. I think Kohli's a really good fielder, but is he one of the best fielders in the world? Is he in like the, he's not Fabian Allen or, Ravi Jadeja or someone like that, is he? Or Glenn Phillips, I suppose, is probably another one that needs to be in that thing at the moment. I don't think India is a poor fielding side, but I'm not sure that they're great. think that going forward, T20 cricket is going to be really interesting because as it becomes more of a power hitting game, is fielding actually going to crash out a little bit, right? Are we going to have players who are not particularly good fielding? I think the worst team was the St. Lucia Zooks. When they at an auction, they had Malinga, Cornwall, Darren Sammy, Pereira, and a couple of others that couldn't field at all. So we're already seeing some teams look at those sorts of things again. But yeah, I haven't really done a power rankings on their fielding, which is now that I wish I had. It'd be really interesting to have a look at it and see. But they'll be disappointed. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a good fielding side or not. If you look at the two things they missed today that cost them that game, one was a catch, which was an absolute sitter that anyone in the world. It was incredible watching Dale Steyn try and say, why he might have dropped that. And the other one was, the run out, which again, I mean, anyone who's played any level of cricket and done any level of fielding practice, that's the first thing that you learn. You learn. Not saying that people don't miss it, of course. These things obviously still happen. But yeah, on that very basic thing, it was absolutely terrible from Rohit Sharma to miss that a run out there. So yeah, those were two bad things. But those are not. I know this is going to sound weird, but those are not things you would say, oh, those are bad fielding. I think with bad fielding, you're looking at technical problems. There were no technical problems in those two things. Rohit got to the ball quickly. Virat was in the right position. But it is what it is. It's the best fielding teams in the world still make really simple mistakes. If you want to go back to the 1999 World Cup, you can have a look at some of those of the South African team who were a fantastic fielding side. All right, I think I found some of my questions now. Here we go. So that was Rahul, wasn't it? Okay. Adil says, there's a lot of criticism regarding KL Rahul's inability to show up in big matches. Do you agree with that? No, I don't agree with that as a concept. I think it's kind of nonsense. When we say in big matches, are we saying the IPL is not big matches? We've seen him play fantastic innings, and we've seen him do it against the world's best bowlers. We know how good KL Rahul is. We also know, like most T20 batters, he's going to go through periods where he's good, where he's not making any runs. I still think he's a fantastic player. There's a lot of top order players in this tournament who've been embarrassed so far. A lot of very skillful players who, haven't looked themselves. It's a tough tournament to make runs for anyone, especially if you're opening up at the moment. I'd be surprised if KL Rahul wasn't playing all the way through to the end of India's tournament, if we're being honest. The whole stuff about he doesn't make runs in big games, it's almost always not true. It's one of those things that people say based on recency bias. It's one of those things people say because they've forgotten the good performances that this person has played in big games. If you have the skills of KL Rahul to absolutely dominate the IPL for multiple years with the bat, and I don't even think we've seen the best of him in the last couple of years, you are, without doubt, one of the best players. There are certain players who probably fit more into the middle order roles, who... It's not so much that they would struggle in the pressure, but they don't have the technical skills when you get to the very top level. So, I mean, most IPL is obviously a better level than most international cricket, T20 cricket now, partly because teams rest their best players, and because India is so strong as a nation on their own. The IPL's then you have the top 6 or so teams when they're all playing their best players, which is slightly above. It's not that big a jump up that you would suddenly think that KL Rahul couldn't handle it. And he certainly made runs under pressure for India before. So, sometimes in T20 cricket, you just fail at the wrong times. It's one of those things that I would never worry about. Nightman said, will you do a power rankings for the teams? Do you know what? I just don't think it's worthwhile at the moment, just because of the way that the points tables have come across. Someone asked about it the other day, I think, as well. It's clearly something that I would normally do, but this tournament's so short and it's so dramatic. I'm not sure about power ranking, and the rain would make my power rankings even tougher. If I was going to do it, it probably would have been today, or I could still have a look at doing one after Australia Ireland tomorrow. But it'll be a bit of a put together one, if we're being honest. It won't be it won't be like the ones I do in the IPL, where I spend a lot of time going through the teams and everything else. But I'll have a look tomorrow at the at Australia Ireland. I mean, we're down to what, 5 teams who can qualify? Well, I suppose more than that. Bangladesh can probably still qualify as well. But we're looking at about 5 teams, I think. I think at the moment, Pakistan are 6th favourites for this tournament, and they're 60-1. So it kind of tells you what the bookies have decided. That dude said, there's no reason why Parnell should start ahead of Janssen on this deck. Well, I think that was a matchup. As I said, I think it was more to do with the swing bowling than anything else. But you're right. And I wonder if it's also slightly a batting thing. Parnell's batting at this stage. I mean, there might be a time where one day Janssen is much better batter than Parnell. And Parnell maybe never even made the most out of his batting. But I think certainly when you look at... when you look at as it is at the moment, they might have done that. But I really think it was the fact that they would have looked at the data at how the Indians handled the swinging ball. And Parnell, even though Janssen can swing the ball, obviously Parnell, that's kind of his speciality. But I can certainly understand your thing. I don't have a huge problem with it either way, if we're being honest. My friend Jamie. The moment the match changed. So I talked about it, I think, a little bit, Jamie, in the actual show itself. I thought that essentially from that point of, what was it, the 14th over when they hit the 2 big sixes, that was when it changed. But if you look at this particular game, it probably changed a few different times. Obviously there was the wickets at the front, then there was Sky's innings. Then it was the fact that India probably didn't quite cash in at the end on what Sky had done. No fault to any of the tail enders. It was tough to get runs away, but they didn't even get a couple of edges over the top or anything. They didn't get as many cheeky boundaries as we've seen, some of the other teams sometimes steal at this point in the tournament. But then, when they got the 3 wickets early on for South Africa, and then they pushed them, it was really that point of they had chances in the half chance in the 11th over, and then a little bit of bad luck for India. Then they had a chance in the 12th over and a chance in the 13th over. If they got any wickets then, Stubbs would have had to come in against the sort of position that he would normally want to be in, on a pitch that he's not really ever going to have faced much cricket. Well, I mean, even in South Africa, when you get bouncy pitches, they're not particularly like that. As Sean Pollock was saying on air, I think. And then you had Parnell and Rabada and Maharaj, right? They're very not even bowling all rounders, really, bowlers who can hit a little bit. So if they'd taken a catch, in the 12th over or got that run out in the 13th over, it would be a very, very different game. Doesn't mean that Miller wouldn't have still done something special to get them home, but it would have been a very different game. If you haven't, go and check out Jamie's YouTube page as well, everyone. All right, let me just see what else we have coming up. This is an interesting one from Time, who says Kohli would have to be the backup opener. Kohli is basically an opener, isn't he? So from that perspective, I don't really have any problems with that. If India choose to go with it, I'm just not sure that. The other problem is if they think KL Rahul is their best opener, that also gives them Virat at number 3. That you then have 3, what I would say, well above average batting talents, batting at 1, 2, and 3 in a tournament where that seems to be really important. If you bring anyone else in, even if you bat someone else at 3, I think you're changing the equilibrium a little bit of this. I'd be shocked if KL Rahul doesn't make runs in this tournament at one stage or another. Although it's such a short tournament, there aren't many games left. But you know what I mean? I'm not sure I would make that change if I came into this tournament thinking he was that good. Here's the sort of question we're looking for. Arshad says, do you think Van Meekeren should bat higher, even be sent in as a pinch hitter? So one thing I think if this was, let's say we played like a league, and we played 14 or 15 games in this particular tournament as it's currently going, and the pitchers kept doing roughly what they're doing so far. I reckon halfway through this league, you would start to see people like Van Meekeren going up the order, just because it does feel at the moment that the worst thing you want to do is send in a top order player when the ball's still nipping around and they can't do anything other than try and survive it, and the bowling's so good that they're not surviving it. You might be better off to send in someone who completely disrupts it. Van Meekeren's hit some very good shots. Shaheen Afridi's hit some good shots. But may even be your kind of Ashwin role, or Andy McBride if he was out with the Ireland team, where you just like, we just need someone to face 15 balls and make roughly 12 to 15 runs. Because you've seen a couple of times in this tournament that period sort of after the 8th over, it does seem to settle down. And we've seen a couple of tail enders slogging at the end, which meant if there were top order players around, they would have been able to cash in a little bit more. So I'm not a pinch hitter person, because I think people always forget that the big negative with pinch hitters isn't that they fail, it's that sometimes they make 2 off 9. But in this particular area, it allows your batters to actually bat when it should be easier to score. So I do find that really, really interesting. Let's see what else. I think this is on the last ball in the Zimbabwe-Bangladesh game. It says, if the keeper didn't break the stumps, the umpire wouldn't review that ball because they only review for dismissals. No, so because it's a no ball, they would have had to check that if they'd noticed it anyway. And I think any time you take the ball in front of the stumps, the umpire can do that. It's something that you do see sometimes in club games, especially with very slow spinners, that wicketkeeper can't help but sort of reach out and get the ball and bring it back. It's a very obscure, odd law, which is brilliant and one of the ones I really love. From that perspective, though, I think that if the square leg umpire thought, and I would assume it was the square leg umpire who would have asked for the replays originally, not the third umpire. If the square leg umpire thought that there was a chance that the gloves were in front, it would have been done automatically, because it's not a review as in, I don't think anyone at Zimbabwe was reviewing it as a DRS. I think it was the umpires going, do you know what, that didn't look quite right to me. Can we have another look at it? It's a bugbear of mine that a lot of back foot no balls and a lot of gloves in front of the stumps just aren't called. Josh Butler did it in a test match in England, and Sky stopped showing the replay afterwards because a bunch of us were going on Twitter, that's a no ball, that shouldn't have been given out. It was really, really annoying that a lot of umpires don't look for it, but it's great that it was seen, and absolutely random that it happened to happen in the last ball. Let's have a look. Let's have a look what else we've got here. Vamasab says, what do you make of the chase once South Africa were within 10 to 15 runs? Why don't teams go for 1s and 2s and get there with low risk? So here's my question for you. I hear this a lot. Was it low risk on that pitch? There was a ball, I'm trying to remember if Arshdeep bowled it or Shami. Actually, Parnell did one. Parnell did a wobble ball, I reckon, whatever his last over was, 16th, 17th over. And it still seamed around a little bit. That's not what we usually see in white ball cricket or in T20 cricket ever. On top of that, you just have the pressure of that particular chase and the fact that at any stage you can get a top edge, playing a shot. Then you've got the chances of runouts and everything else. I don't think South Africa played that particularly poorly at all. They knew that they were in a position that where 1 or 2 hits could make a big difference to their chance of winning the game. They got a couple of those hits and they lost a couple of wickets. So it was about even. But I don't have a particular problem with how South Africa went about that at all. Let's just see what else we have. Do you know there's one that isn't here but I did find it early on and somehow I missed it when I came back through. Someone was asking about something to do with squads. I've been thinking about this a lot in this game today, and I'm trying to think if it happened in another game as well, maybe another game at Perth. And this came up with, I've tried to raise this with some people inside the ICC to see what they think. IPL has 25 players in their squad, I think there are a lot of leagues that have 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, those sorts of amounts of players. And then we come to a World Cup and we have 15 players in a squad. 15 players in a squad allows you, what? 2 backup bowlers, a batter who can probably wicket keep if things go bad, and another hitter, maybe an all-rounder, to give yourself some more flexibility. That's nothing. And I was thinking about that when India turned up today. If they had Umran Malik in their squad, you would play him. I'm trying to think if I think the Sri Lanka game might be different because they might have not have had 7 fit bowlers available, or 4 fit bowlers available to them. But Sri Lanka was another team that could have done that as well. And we, instead of having the best players playing available, we actually just have 15 players, and then you have to pick from them. That's not always going to be the best players available for that particular pitch or for that particular game. And the reason, of course, is it's cheaper for the ICC, and we've been doing this for a very long time, and the franchises are the ones who are doing it slightly differently. But there is certainly going to be a World Cup where you might want, England might want to take someone like, I don't know, Parkinson or Benny Howell, or maybe a particular kind of hitter for one game, for one location that they think that they will use them on. And, there's lots of different teams who might be able to do that. And I've been thinking about that a lot with this Perth situation of, Sri Lanka using 2 spinners. Partly that might have been because of injuries as well. But again, the whole idea of these sorts of a World Cup, you would think, is that you play your best team. And because we have these artificially, unnecessarily small squad sizes, we're not actually having the best 11 players out there. And, I'm not saying it won't cost more money and all those sorts of things, but I do wonder if going ahead in the future, we will continue to have World Cups with such small squad sizes, which for me doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's have a see. What else have we got here? Just seeing if there's anything else. Yeah, Rahul says Sky took down Maharaj, right-hander versus left-arm spinner. So that is the basic matchup, right? But there's way more to a matchup than just that one fact. There are some players who prefer the ball spinning away, certainly some right-handers, not as many left-handers, who prefer the ball spinning away than spinning back into them. There are some players who actually really like either finger spin or wrist spin, but not the other one. And then there's the more conventional players who just like the ball spinning back into them, no matter whether it's going through wrist or seam. So matchups are far more confusing than I think we give a lot of credit for. And, it's something I've tried to talk about quite a bit on this channel in the past. I haven't got Sky's numbers against left-arm finger spinners to hand, but quite clearly he saw today, even if he didn't have a great matchup personally, he kind of had to go for Maharaj. If he'd been dismissed, let's say hitting that 6 early on, or maybe playing that cut shot from middle and leg that he played, even if he gets dismissed from that, he's, he had to attack Maharaj to get them to a total that India could get. If he gets dismissed, they're going to lose anyway. And if he blocks Maharaj around, they're going to lose. So I thought that was very clever batting. That's why I highlighted it in the video earlier on. Let's see who else we've got here. Oren says, was Arshdeep swinging it in both ways conventionally? So he'd be one of those left arms to do it. Well, Jack Chantry could only swing it into left-handers. So Wasim Akram was certainly someone else that could swing it both ways. So for those who don't know, most left-arm seamers can only swing the ball in one direction, and that is usually away from left-handers and into right-handers. It's really uncommon for someone to be able to swing the ball away unless they're using reverse swing. So Arshdeep swinging the ball both directions. Again, I think it just shows that I'm not sure he has like a top level elite skill, but he's got so many little skills, a little bit like Potts in Test matches for England, where you're just like, oh, he can do this, and he can do this, and he can do this. And none of those balls are incredible, but because he has them all available to him. If he did that intentionally today, and I don't think I've ever seen him control swing back in that way before, but if he did it intentionally today and he can replicate it, it's two things. A, it's really interesting because his left arm seamer who can swing the ball in both directions, which means that he can bowl around the wicket with a new ball, aim the ball in at middle stump, and then swing it away, which is, as was a macro, proved almost impossible to hit. And the second thing is that it means that he has the it means that he's much harder to line up in the power play directly. If you can swing the ball both ways in the power play, like Mark Adair, like Bhuvi Kumar, that really gives you a massive advantage at the top because it's just so much harder to be able to line you up at that stage. So it's really huge to be able to do that. Chico says, bad luck, lol, this guy kissing India's butt. What show have you been watching, mate? Seriously, have a look at yourself. I mean, India lost today. Pakistan's out of the tournament. India lost today. I thought India took it to the last over, despite the fact that twice South Africa almost punched them out. South Africa were fantastic. Go back and look at the video. It's okay to be an idiot. Just try not to do it publicly, would be my question. Let's see what else we've got here. I don't know if there's anything to that. Huda played today, I think, because they thought South Africa had so many left-handers. The thing with Huda is, there's a lot of people I'm not sure what his one skill is that gets him into an international side. His bowling, he bowls so rarely. You could barely say he's a frontline bowler. His batting can come off, but again, I'm not sure he's strong enough to consistently come off against the best bowlers in the world. I think it was more just a matchup thing where they thought Akshar Patel probably wouldn't bowl that much against South Africa. And so they had a slightly stronger batter available to them, and a more flexible batter, someone who could bat in more positions probably. Not that Akshar can't be used as a pinch hitter, but Huda is a slightly stronger batter from that perspective. But they didn't use his bowling. They probably didn't particularly need it either, but they didn't use his bowling today. And so I can see why he's there. It's a perfect example again of that sort of 15-player squad situation where. Not sure if Huda's your only other option, you bring him in. But perhaps in another game, I'm trying to think of who might have been a better option. Someone like Washington Sundar might have been better on Perth with the extra bounce and the batting that he could provide, which is probably not quite at Huda's level, but again can play up. It might have been better for them to have that option available to them, but it does. I don't think it was a huge mistake playing Huda. Once they saw what the wicket was doing, though, in the previous game, especially when they saw the Dutch bowling on it, I think the Dutch bowling on it was should have been the real canary in the coal mine to be like, maybe Huda's going to struggle a little bit there today. Let's just see if we've got anyone else. This is an interesting one. So Nightwing says, Nagarava, I always get that wrong. Sorry, Richard, has been an underrated death bowler. Look. All the Zimbabwean bowlers, I think they all went at around a run a ball or slightly better. I want to say again today. Shatara, obviously Evans, and Blessing has been brilliant at times as well. I think the Zimbabwe bowlers have been great. I didn't know anything about Evans coming in. I think I knew a little bit about the other three I'd known a little bit of. I'm really interested to see how they, manage to keep and develop this core, and if there's more of these sorts of guys coming through, because that seems like a real strength for Zimbabwean cricket that I kind of put down on paper, I think, before the tournament, that I like their bowling lineup, but even in a bowling tournament, they've definitely exceeded where I thought they would be able to bowl in that kind of position. What have we got? Last question. From Don 007. How do you rate Curtis Camphor? Okay, so I think Curtis Camphor, I don't know how old you are, Don, but there was a player for Australia called James Hopes. who I think now coaches in one of the IPL franchises off the bench, one of the assistants, who, when you looked at him in club cricket, you'd think, yeah, he's a good cricketer, but this is kind of where he goes. And at every level you looked at James Hope, you'd be like, yeah, he's good, in representative cricket. Yeah, he's good at shield cricket. But no one really thought he would keep going, and he ended up being a very handy player for Australia for a long period of time. Curtis Campher has a lot of that about him. He's very full-hearted, puts everything into his game. He's a very clever cricketer, and I think that doesn't always come across in cricketers like him because it looks like they're trying harder than everyone else. But I actually think in that particular case, he's also got a lot of again, what we're talking about with someone like Arshdeep, where he doesn't have like a ball. Curtis Campher doesn't bowl a delivery. We just like, wow, he's going to be successful for a long time. He's not tall. He's not fast. He doesn't swing at mass. All those sorts of things. And you look at his batting again. He doesn't particularly have one skill where you're just like, wow, he'll be around for a while here. But what Curtis Campher does have is he has a lot of little smaller skills that he can put together in batting and bowling. He's also a brilliant fielder. And then he tries incredibly hard almost on every ball. And I wonder what his ceiling is. I don't think for Irish cricket they ever want him to be in their best 5 or 6 players, because you want the very skillful players to be in that position. But if he can be the 7th or 8th best player and he's picked automatically because he gives them flexibility, if he can bat top 6, and I think he's probably eventually going to be at best a number 6, probably a number 7. If they're a really good team. If they're not a really good team, he'll have to bat higher, of course. But I think if he bats in a position like that, I think he gives them good flexibility because they can use his bowling when they need to use it rather than having to use it all the time. And I don't think he should bowl in every game. But certainly in Ireland, he's going to have games where he's going to be very good. He's a slightly better bowler than, let's say, someone like Richie Barrington. And Scotland use him really well in that kind of regard of, well, this is a pitch that will help Richie Barrington and this isn't. And Campher's, I think, a step up on that. But Barrington's a better bat than Campher and can bat far higher in the order. So I think he's limited in some ways, but he brings so many different skills to the table that we've already seen him in a very short career win 2 World Cup games for Ireland. And I mean, how many players would love to win 1 World Cup game for their team? That's a really handy player to have. Also, I think I have correctly rated him for what he can do at every level, and he keeps outperforming where I think he will go. So I'm saying he's a limited player who should never be in the best 5 or 6 players for Ireland. He continually seems to do better than that. So either I'm just underestimating him based on the fact he doesn't have that one killer skill, or he's one of those players who just keeps working and keeps being smart and keeps working out how to make himself the best player he is. But I think he's a really, really fascinating player. And it could be in a couple of years you see that he's a player who can bat, let's say, number 7 and doesn't bowl that often, and he'll be of no use to Ireland if they've got a really good team around him. Or if he keeps developing the way he is, because he is still quite young, and he's obviously very hungry, you might have a player who can bat 5 or 6, who can bowl his full quota of overs every second game and is incredibly handy to you going ahead. That kind of flexibility is phenomenal. So I'm very fascinated by Curtis Campher as a prospect, as a player, also outside of Ireland, because we're talking about Irish cricket here. Where does he fit into franchise cricket? I think the fact that he's a right arm medium fast bowler probably means that he's not as useful as having a second skill if he was a spinner or if he was a left arm bowler. But I do think that, it'd be really interesting to track him and see where he is in 3 years' time. But thank you to everyone. If you haven't seen the Virat Kohli video, that is up on the site. You can have a look at it. We'll be doing some other ones as well. Just some parting thoughts. I thought South Africa were really good today. The only reason they didn't beat India very well is just because a couple of moments and India fought their way back into the game. But I think South Africa were by far the better team all the way through that particular game. Pakistan, they could win their next 2 games and would make an absolute mockery of themselves going home early. And either way, again, I was a bit disappointed with the way that they went about their game today. Bangladesh is, I suppose, the other interesting team of that group left. I just don't think they have the batting to bother the better teams. But I suppose we're about to find out if this grit and grind method can work in what is a bowlers World Cup. Like, I thought Bangladesh had a better chance in the last World Cup of doing something, and in UAE conditions that should have favored them. So far, they've played better cricket, I think, in this World Cup, which is a great sign for them. And it's great to see Taskin Ahmed taking wickets as well. Thank you to everyone. And remember, all 99.94 podcasts are out there. And I'm sure there are firing episodes off left, right, and center at the moment. So go out and take them up. And as I said, have a look at the Virat Kohli video that we put up this morning as well. And I'll see you again after the Australia-Ireland game tomorrow. Oh, what are we watching here? Has Muku got a trailer? Has Muku put together a trailer?
Across the line, which is probably what most cricketers would do if they're trying to score a 4 or 6 off this particular delivery. If you do that at the MCG though, you're actually hitting it to one of the largest pockets of the ground. Even if it comes out of the middle, you're a chance of being caught. And there's obviously a fielder right there for that. So instead, Virat goes straight. And that is what makes this a truly remarkable cricket shot. This is basically a back foot straight drive. It's not completely straight, as the bat does come through on a bit of an angle at the end. But a back foot drive is more or less what he is playing. There are other players who could hit this ball straight down the ground, but almost all of them would have to back away and do an almost flat bat shot. To stand up and have your elbow in a normal position and almost your eyes over the ball and play with a straight blade off the back foot, straight back over the bowler's head, 4-6 at a huge ground is absolutely remarkable. There you go. I'll see you back here tomorrow. And if you haven't seen that video, go look at it. And if you need some podcasts, well, 99.94 has got you covered for this World Cup. Go out and listen. I'll see you then. Bye.